We know Aegon and Rhaenyra are vying for the Iron Throne, but do we have to worry about Aemond as well?
Will Damon go full out crazy?
How many houses and how many dragons will we see wage war?
Is it possible for Alicent and Rhaenyra to find peace?
Red and Red Real Reviews enters the lair to light up some opinions on House of the Dragon Season 2 on Max.
Question: what kind of bear is best?
When they say 2% milk, I don't know what the other 98% is.
That's a ridiculous question. Who is it you think you see?
False. Black bear. Well, that's debatable.
You know nothing, don't you? Allergies?
Cowardice and weak-willed men. And hazelnuts.
Who the hell are you? You know.
Boy, have you lost your mind? Cause I'll help you find it.
I didn't actually sell my last car, I just forgot where I parked it.
You have also heard the phrase, "The Lannister always pays his debts."
That idea is literally the greatest idea I have ever heard in my life.
Randall, look at eye contact, please. You're gonna be cool, right?
Oh, baby, I'm as cool as the other side of the pillow. You feel me?
Stop pooping.
You all know exactly who I am.
Fact. Bears eat beets.
Woo, that's a brilliant plan, is it?
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
Bears do not.
Say my name.
That idea is terrible.
What is going on?
No, you clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in.
Sexual history.
Epic and private.
I guarantee you, Toby, I've had it a billion times before. It goes like this.
Do you exercise?
Yes, love making and woodworking.
Margarita, tequila soda, tequila rocks, tequila shot, hotel, sex, room service, shower sex, Uber. It's...
Oh my God.
That's gross. I love it.
It's hard to believe we're even the same species. Baba booey.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, and happy birthday to us because Red and Red Real Reviews is officially 21. We can go party out all night long.
21 episodes old, we are.
Yeah. And on top of that, happy birthday to me because this episode's dropping on my birthday.
Oh, that'll be fun. Nice.
So here we have another big time major release. We just did Cobra Kai. Now we're stacking up another banger with House of the Dragon, much anticipated. It started back in June because I guess this one's not so much of a weird release because HBO back in the day always did weekly releases. So it's not so weird to have this one come out one episode a week. It's just frustrating because you're streaming it. You're not waiting for a broadcast schedule.
Yeah, but I guess they're trying to stick with trying to make it. They want to cater to the Game of Thrones fans, right? So
Right.
I guess they're trying to make it nostalgic or trying to make it as close to that as possible. So like if they just dropped it all at once, people would probably feel differently about it.
I mean, to that note, you can't get more nostalgic than repurposing the music every time. Although I know you skip intro, so you're probably not even watching it.
I do skip the intro, or if I have something to do, I like use it as like a buffer time. I'm like, oh, I got 1 minute and 30 seconds to do whatever I got to do before the show comes on.
I would have never guessed Law and Order to have more of a banger than Game of Thrones, but that's just me.
No, I mean, yeah, I feel like it's pretty repetitive. And like, I don't look to the visuals of the theme song. Like I know how they like show all the different parts of the land and the families or whatever. Like I never paid attention to that part, even with Game of Thrones.
So speaking of Thrones, of course, this is a spin-off from the acclaimed hit series, which didn't exactly have the most favorable ending to fans of the show. And we come off season 1, and this is really to me, this series is meant to lay clarity to the rise of the Mad King because we've got 200 years before the Game of Thrones that everyone knows. So that means we've got to go through like 2 or 3 generations of Targaryens before we start seeing King Aerys and see how that kind of set up, and of course how whatever events took place for the Baratheons to take the Iron Throne. So it's very interesting to me to like watch this and be invested in the characters we're seeing now, but at the same time knowing that the characters we're watching in these first couple seasons are probably not the characters that had any type of direct impact on the characters we know from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I mean, since this is a prequel, I think, we've heard of these characters referred to, not these characters, but we've heard of Aegon the Conqueror, haven't we? They've mentioned that before in Game of Thrones, probably. We've heard of the Mad King, and this is all a way to bring life to the little stories and little anecdotes we've just heard. So, I mean, yeah, it's totally... I think it's going to go back and forth quite a bit in history, with the struggle over the throne over this next 150 years or whatever it is, 130 years.
Yeah, and that's my thing. I don't know whether I'm being impatient or I just don't know how much emotion to get involved in characters that may not be a part of the arcs we already have in mind.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, back then, I don't really expect the life expectancies to be very much. So they lived until they were 40 or 50 years old. So I expect a lot of these characters will probably find endings prior to when we think, they should die. We'll be like, oh, that was too soon.
Yeah. We think like, okay, 2-3 generations maybe before we catch up. But it'll probably be like 4 or 5 just because, like you said, life expectancy is not.
Yeah, could be.
Although King Viserys lasted a little while, at least as far as I can guess his age was.
Yeah, he was, I mean, I guess we would assume that he was the oldest brother, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there might be quite a gap between him and Daemon, which I know there's quite a gap between Daemon and Rhaenyra too, but...
And even Rhaenys, who was Viserys' and Daemon's sister.
Yeah.
So, it's funny because we spent some time in our last episode of Cobra Kai going over alliances, and Game of Thrones, the Game of Thrones universe, so to speak, is nothing to sneeze at when it comes to alliances, partnerships, at times two-faced, got people playing both sides. It's like, okay, I'll tell this house I got their back, but I'm really working this deal over here. And then you come around and you stab the initial house in the back when it suits your fancy. So, I mean, as far as the houses of the Kingdom of Westeros are concerned, we're kind of seeing them come in piece by piece, but we're not really seeing all of them. Like they hinted at House Stark at the very beginning of the season, but then you kind of didn't hear anything about them the rest of the way. The water house, Ironborn of the Sea or whatever they called themselves.
Theon's people?
Huh? Theon, yeah. Theon's people. Yeah.
Greyjoys.
Greyjoys, yes, thank you. So yeah, Starks, Greyjoys, Dorns, we really haven't gotten a taste of those houses that we're really used to from Game of Thrones. And like obviously we've seen the Lannisters so far. Obviously the series is based on Targaryens, but what do you think are kind of like the notable houses in House of the Dragon as the spotlight is on this series as opposed to in Game of Thrones, the houses that were famous then?
Oh man. They do mention the Tarleys a couple times in this series, but I mean, really it comes down to the I don't know if I would call it the kingdom, but the kingdom at King's Landing and the kingdom at Dragonstone, is it?
Dragonstone, yeah.
And then yeah, I mean, it's really a big theme of this season was definitely the sort of the face-off of Rhaenyra and Alicent. They're in these two different places with two different circumstances. And then a big, I don't know if I would call it an alliance or partnership. And you're trying to figure out what with all of these partnerships, you're trying to figure out whether they are honest or whether there's some bad intention there. And like, you really, like, you're just like, this has got to be two-faced, right? You know, the whole thing with Larys and Aegon, I just kind of think that, you know, when they go to Harrenhal, they talk about Larys and they're like, oh, he's sold out and we hate him. You know, he's from here and he doesn't represent us and blah, blah, blah. And I really think it's Larys is kind of like the new Littlefinger. He's like the hand. He just wants to like stir shit up and be involved, and he needs control, but he's the one that's kind of, you know, egging people on. So he's really encouraging Aegon. And I don't think it shows his like just being honorable and just being like, oh, like you're just talking this guy off of a ledge who, you know, his whole body is burned. He's like disfigured physically. You know, he's talking about how he's alone. His dragon is dead. He physically looks like a mess. And he's, you know, Larys is like building him up, but you're like, what is he doing this for? You know, like there's got to be some reason he like, you don't think that out of the goodness of his heart, he's like, I believe in this guy and he should be king. And like, there's to me, there's got to be something behind it as to why he's being so supportive and why he's building him up.
And to that point, it's also, you notice like the Targaryens know how to pick them, right? Because you have Larys who kind of plays the hand role a little bit, even though Kristen took over the hand role. But even Otto Hightower, when he was the hand, he was the same way, because he was, if I'm not mistaken, from season 1, he played a big role in pushing Viserys away from what he wanted to do with Rhaenyra being his heir and marrying Alicent, trying to bear more sons, and then going with an heir that way. So like you have the councils around the Targaryens. I don't know whether it makes you feel bad for the Targaryens or not, but the people they keep close to the vest don't exactly always have their best interests at heart.
Well, I mean, you could equate it to politics these days, or of any time period, really, that, you know, people in power will always have one person or some people around them that are whispering in their ear and telling them bad things or advising them in a bad way and don't have really their best interest at heart. And I'm very skeptical of Larys. I think, I mean, even from what we saw in the first season, wasn't he like a peeping Tom, or he's just very creepy. Yeah. And then you mentioned Hightower. I think I wrote it down somewhere, but I can't find where it was. But Hightower is very much the same way. He wants to be that behind the scenes guy that's like really in charge, but it doesn't look like he's in charge because he's like kind of lurking in the shadows. Like he is that type of person, like Larys is.
Pulling the strings. And
yes.
To your point, equating it to modern day politics, we can almost call it the deep state of Westeros.
Yes. Yes. That's an accurate portrayal for sure.
A big one to me, especially in season 2, is Daemon with everyone. Yeah. Like Daemon is the one that Rhaenyra initially tasked with going out, visiting all these houses, trying to get everybody on board with supporting her claim to the Iron Throne. But it also feels like he's playing two cards at once, because he has a lot of animosity towards the ascension to the throne, because he feels that the throne should have been him, with Viserys not having a male heir and going to Rhaenyra without a male heir. He kind of feels like as the eldest brother, he should have ascended to the throne instead. And to me, that almost kind of feels like equating it to Stannis Baratheon in Game of Thrones. Like, okay, the Targaryens shouldn't have taken the throne because Robert was married to a Lannister. It should have been, I'm sorry, the Lannisters should have taken the throne because King Robert was married to Cersei. Like, it should go to me because I was Robert's brother or whatnot. So, and it's interesting to kind of watch this and wonder, and especially the way we get to the end. I don't know if it's too early in the show to say it, but how it ends with Daemon and Rhaenyra, you almost kind of wonder, like, is he that guy that's still playing this game of two cards and he's only being loyal to her as a useful, a kind of useful idiot kind of tool to or storytelling element to keep his own selfish ambitions afloat.
Yeah, I think you're sort of skeptical about what his intentions are, maybe because he just seems very unsure of himself. Like he kind of seems unsure of what he wants or wants to happen. Like you do know that he kind of feels like he was cheated out of the throne. I kind of look at him like I would call him the spare. He's kind of a Prince Harry character. He's obviously
yes.
He's obviously very bitter about it. And so that kind of drives, well, like you always kind of have that in the back of your mind, like, okay, maybe that's driving what he's doing. Like, is he going to do what he was told to do, or is he just going to like do his own thing? You're not really sure.
So you almost have sympathy for Daemon. I'm thinking in the back of my mind, he's conniving, he's scummy, like that sort of thing. You're almost like having a little bit of a sympathetic um uh, edge to his claim to the throne, or perceived claim to the throne.
Well, yes and no. Like, here's the thing. I don't feel sorry for Prince Harry. I'll just say that, but he's a little whiny crybaby. But when it comes to Daemon, I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but for some reason, I'm like, yes, he's a screw up, but for some reason you're almost kind of rooting for him. And at least I feel like I'm almost kind of rooting for him. So, I mean, you do feel skeptical about what his plans are and why he's doing the things he's doing or what he's doing. But I mean, you're just kind of hoping that he is going to come out with good intentions in the end. I mean, I think.
I'm not. I don't trust him farther than I can throw him. I mean, it would be nice if he just backed Rhaenyra since she was the heir that his brother named. It would be nice. But for some reason, I just don't have a lot of confidence that he's going to be that way.
I mean, I would like to think that when he does something, he's looking to help, but usually it just kind of ends up going awry, and it's not always his fault. Like, for example, the whole thing where he hires the rat catcher to kill, was it Aemond or Aegon?
Yeah, the intention was to kill Aemond, and these idiots went and killed a baby instead.
Yeah, and they're like, who cares? It's a son for a son or something. So it was like that's not what he paid you to do. So I mean, that was not his fault. He was just trying to help, like in his own way. Of course, like, was it flawed? Probably, but it from the beginning. But his intention was to help the situation. So he's like, okay, I'm going to hire this imbecile to, which I don't know. I mean, that was kind of a hard thing, a hard objective to achieve, and he's just giving it to some random guy.
Yeah. And the other one, we touched on Rhaenyra a little bit, but the big alliance in this season, and especially as the season ends, is this patching circumstance of Rhaenyra and Alicent's friendship. They're two queens by completely different circumstances. They grew up as friends. Alicent, it appeared like she didn't support Rhaenyra's claim to the throne at the time of Viserys' death, because in her mind, I don't know whether it was a little bit of own selfishness because she bore a son. So it's like, oh, my son's going to be king, or if it was some commitment to tradition where sons are only on the throne. So like, and obviously that kind of turns around by the time we get to the end of it, where she's filled with a lot of regret and such. But this all comes to head because she sees Aegon ruling with a lot of immaturity, lacking of control. He's kind of flying by the seat of his pants, not showing a lot of experience. I mean, the kid can't be more than 16 years old. You'd kind of assume that he would be an inexperienced leader. But then after the roasting, I guess we'll say, really assassination attempt on his life. We see Aemon ruling on an interim basis, and she's almost like, oh my goodness, like I thought Aegon was unfit for the throne. This kid's completely off his rocker.
Yeah, and I think she's kind of like horrified by that. So, I mean, there were a couple times where the piece was sort of on Rhaenyra's terms, and then it was sort of on Alicent's terms in certain terms.
Yeah.
But they had that scene at the not like a cemetery. It was like a I don't know what that was, where they would light the candles for the dead or whatever.
Yeah.
But they had that Rhaenyra kind of snuck there, right? And it was like, shh, don't say anything, it's me. Like, had like a little shawl on and snuck to talk to Alicent. So they had that whole exchange where basically Alicent tells Rhaenyra that, her father changed his mind. And she said that quote about I forget what it was.
And
something
that was
about
what flipped. That was what flipped Alicent's perception or Rhaenyra's mind, because I think Rhaenyra went there thinking they were still friends.
Yeah, they kind of both went there thinking different things, and then Alicent was like, no offense to you, but like your dad changed his mind, and Rhaenyra's like, that's not possible, like he said those actual words. And she's like, yeah, and she just didn't want to believe her. And I thought that was a really good scene between them, though, as actors with their characters in that scene. And then the final scene that they had together was really powerful, like that. What they were asking each other to do to just let's be rid of this warring, let's just be done with it, and like this is what has to happen in order for that to happen. And I wrote down the quotes where Alicent said, I cast myself on the mercy of a friend who once loved me. She's like, let's just like lay our weapons down, like you can come to King's Landing, there's going to be no incident, like you can just take over, no one gets hurt, basically. And then Rhaenyra says to her, history will paint you as a villain, they'll say that you're a cold queen or something like that. And then Alicent's like, let them think what they must, she's just saying like, I don't want to be tortured like this, like I've had enough of this just heartache with the warring between us.
And it's also, to me, it's not just that she's had enough with the warring. I think she's also just had enough with this family, because she just wants to take, at this point, she thinks the only child she has left that's unmarred from this is Helena. She just wants to grab her, get out of the city, and just run off to, almighty knows where, and just kind of be rid of the King's Landing, the Targaryens, this non-existent. She just wants out. No more war, no more Targaryen, no more quest for the throne,
right.
None of that, no more kingdom. So she's just, yeah, when she's making that deal, so to speak, it's like, just come in, no fight, let your dragons kind of roast the front of the city and take it.
Yeah, and then with the whole exchange with Rhaenyra being like, well, that like I have to take Aegon's head, like that has to happen. She's like, what I'm talking about, that's true. And then it kind of ends with Alicent basically being tearful about it. Obviously, like this is her son, but she kind of agrees, like, okay, I guess that's what we have to do.
And also could be a little bit of a mercy, because obviously Aegon is not in the best of shape right now. He still can't really move and get out of bed. Half his face is fried to fricassee.
Right.
So that almost could be like she's sitting there. It's like, well, do I let Rhaenyra have this symbolic slaying of my son just to put him out of his misery, and then I can be free of this, and he's also free of this pain.
Right, to end his suffering, I think. Yeah, and it's a difficult decision, but she ends up basically agreeing to it by the end of their conversation. But it's still, I mean, they were former friends, so it's hard to see them like interact kind of as strangers, you know, to be like, to really have to put their cards on the table with someone who they once really cared for, but like now there's just like nothing there, or there's very little there.
Yeah, and you did bring up that quote about you will be remembered as a villain, which hints betrayal to the kingdom, to the family, to the throne. So one of the things that's synonymous with the throne's saga, as much as alliances, is betrayal. Because shocker, everybody wants the Iron Throne. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what house you're from, what your family is, everybody wants the throne. So,
oh, yeah.
And I felt at a couple points throughout the season, we were starting to get to almost moral of the story, where this concept is brought to our attention of being a reluctant leader, where Viserys is remembered as a king who reigned over a long era of peace. And Rhaenyra has it in her mind, she's aware of that and she wants to continue that. So she's almost waging this war, not because of her own aggressive opinions and ambitions, but because she wants to preserve and continue her father's legacy. So, and that gets hinted at. I can't remember whether this is Daemon's wife by certificate or whatever, but the woman with the long dark hair, she says to Daemon, like, you need to remember, like, maybe you weren't chosen for the throne because you want it so much.
Yeah, I think that was her, because I remember somebody saying something, making the point that Viserys didn't want to be in power, and that's why he was such a good leader. Because, you know, we learned that too with politicians. It's like, if you want it so bad, like, you're going to be a tyrant probably, but if you don't want it, you're going to be very conscientious about what the people want. And you know, if you're just kind of thrown into power and you didn't want that power, you're going to do good with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think that's really coming to head as the season ends. And it's funny because the end of the season sets us up with an incoming huge battle. We're expecting the dragons all to fly in and torch the front gates and, call the conquest a day. But we also like have to remember these kind of themes and morals, because if these things are true, then that's going to last about 10 minutes of the first episode. And then it's in theory going to be more of a kind of peaceful continuation. Obviously, they've got to string a whole season out. So you would think Aemond probably won't die in the next 10 minutes. Maybe Aegon does, but Aemond's not. And he's going to be the one like, well, I should be the next one and the next one in line. And now you've got another battle that's going to brew. You know, okay, Aegon's gone. Rhaenyra's back in power, but now Aemon's still out there, and he's a lunatic anyway. So now he's going to be the one raging power instead of Rhaenyra, or waging war for the throne claim instead of Rhaenyra.
Yeah, and it's complicated too, because of the fact that Rhaenyra is the half sister of Aemond and Aegon, right? So it's like, it just makes it more complicated. The fact that they're all trying to off each other and they're all family.
Yeah, well, it is Westeros after all.
I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. Just even the relationship or the betrayal and the constant like at each other's throats with Aemond and Aegon. That whole thing is just very contentious, constantly. Like just, and it's just, you know, even Aegon like making fun of like Aemond like being with this like older prostitute or something, like just so immature, like haha, like pointing and laughing, like, you know, just ridiculing his brother, and like the rage that causes in Aemond to just be like, I'm gonna burn that guy like to the death.
Yeah, and to that point, you have like with that, and then both at the end when he almost not almost, he does, when he threatens Helena with charging her with treason if she doesn't ride a dragon against Rhaenyra. So you almost have another situation there where like this guy is only out for, he's very selfish, he's only out for himself, because not only did he torch his brother, he's also willing to cast a presumably death sentence upon his sister if she won't help his claim to this.
Yeah, it's just to me, the whole thing with Helena is just wild, because I kind of have forgotten between the first and second season that like how do I say this? Helena, her brother and her husband are the same people. Like,
yes.
I kind of forgot that. So I was like a little bit confused, because I'm thinking of Helena as like a sister-in-law to Aemond, and I'm like, wait, she's his actual sister. Oh
Yeah.
my fucking God.
It is
like
the Targaryen way.
It's just it's
keep
so
the bloodline pure.
it's so twisted that I always forget about that. And like, don't they kind of show, or they isn't Aegon either abusive to Helena, or I mean he's both. He's disloyal to her. He like sleeps around, and he like physically abuses her, doesn't he?
I remember him being verbally abusive. I can't recall a scene where he was physically abusive. I could be misremembering it. I do remember him not being the nicest guy. Then again, he's not the nicest guy to anyone.
Or maybe it wasn't to her. Maybe he was physically abusive to like prostitutes that he brought around, or something. I don't remember what it was, but like, it's hard to just believe that that was just last season. Like, it wasn't that long ago. Like, we kind of forget about some of the things that happened in that first season, when it really wasn't so far in the past.
Yeah, and to that point, it's funny how you have this Targaryen mindset where you have a lot of incest to keep the bloodline pure, but almost all of them go off and sleep around on the side because it's almost like in their mind they know that's not right. They're just doing it to preserve the bloodline, but like they know it's not right. So like Rhaenyra has something on the side, and Jace doesn't have the platinum blonde hair. Daemon, I think at one point he was messing around with Rhaenyra, his niece, but at the same time he's got this other woman on the side. Alicent, Viserys marries Alicent, and she's over here sleeping with Criston Cole. So it's messed up that they do it because it's gross and icky, but at the same time they might also know it's messed up. They're just doing it for their legacy, and then they go ahead and actually find true love, if you want to put it that way, with someone else.
Yeah, it's just a really weird thing to wrap your head around. And I felt like I had to keep reminding myself of that. Things that kind of seemed so normal were just like, wait, okay, so these guys come in the middle of the night and they kill your son, but this is your son that you had with your brother/husband. So it's like you're constantly trying to be like, okay, this is not a normal situation. Like, this is like way beyond that.
Yeah. You had a couple other ones. And the Eric and Eric, that was a very minutiae scene, but it kind of like rang a bell, like it happened, and he's like, nope, I got this. Like, I can't even live with myself anymore for that one.
Yeah, I forget what Eric's twin brother was named, but the fact that they're kind of working for opposing sides, so like when it came down to it, they were willing to, and they did, like, fight to the death. But then you're thinking like, this isn't just a sibling, this is your twin brother who you like shared a womb with, like. So you have that like, oh my God, I just put a sword through my twin brother. Like, that makes me feel like half of me is missing. So like, it was just like heartbreaking that it had to end that way. But it was just crazy. The idea of having that mission to kill Rhaenyra. And then in that moment when you're like, oh my God, who is who? Which one is Eric and which one is the brother? And then like you could tell that like the people in the room were kind of like, wait, who's who?
Yeah, it was like, okay, which one's the good Eric and which one's the bad Eric?
Yeah, it was like I mean, that was the ultimate betrayal. Like that you end up having to kill your own brother and then you can't live with it, so you kill yourself. Like,
speaking of more families being torn apart, we touched on it a little bit before. Otto Hightower with his constant manipulation and picking sides going back and forth.
Yeah, he's a pretty crooked guy. And you know, at some point he is trying to pull the strings for this was for the child, right? That was killed, who was like 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
He was really like wanting, was his name Jaceres or something? I don't know, it started with a J.
So.
I get confused.
Like that, yeah.
So that's when he was like, well, this is my grandson and blah, blah, blah. And he like really wanted to like get in there and be the advisor. But like you're questioning, you're like, okay, like you're trying to make it seem like you're all about your family. Like, are you? Or like you don't really care who it is that's ruling. You just want to be the one to whisper in their ear what they should do. Like you just want to be right there.
I think with that, with determining how to go after the assassins, the rat catchers, he was using that as a moment of symbolism. Like, okay, if you go after them and kill them, that's going to give Aegon a perception to the simple folk. And I think Otto Hightower still kind of had it in his head that Aegon should be following after Viserys and being this king of peace and not necessarily putting a public execution on display, whereas Aegon just wants raw blood because his son just got whacked in the crib.
Right.
So like there's that. So that part of manipulation to me was almost a sense of you're young, you're immature, you don't know what these actions are going to have a ripple effect through your kingdom.
And I think too, the fact that Hightower is very manipulative, he's very concerned with optics and not even just optics, but like how things seem. So that's why he's like, okay, well, we're gonna parade this dead kid through the city, like so that people can see what these people did. The people need to see it. Like it's weird because he's almost kind of not just an advisor, he's like the PR, he's the PR, the palace PR, where he's trying to control appearances of things and not really trying to control the gossip, but trying to control the publicity of what goes on.
Which is funny because you think that would fall on Lair as being the Lord of Whispers. You think that would be his job, not Hightower, not Otto Hightower's as the hand.
Right. So it's not really like his job is just a lot more than what it seems. And like he's a very important person who pulls the strings. So yeah, I think it was it the second or third episode where he was like sent away?
Yeah, and then he just kind of disappeared. I was like, okay, this guy was held a very prestigious position on the council and had very strong, long ties to the family, and now he's just poof gone.
Yeah, and I think they only I don't remember if it was at the end, but didn't they show him? I had to like look it up just to be sure. I was like, what happened to Hightower? Like, is he in jail or like as a prisoner or where is he? So what I kind of gleaned from the situation was that he had some sort of meddling he was doing with the Tarleys, or I don't know if it was against the Tarleys. So people think that that's going to resurface in like season 3, that there's going to be more to that story. And like, this is not the end of like Hightower's dealings pretty much.
Yeah, especially with young Oscar Tully, his newfound alliance with Daemon, where he says, okay, we'll swear allegiance to you, but you need to atone for your sins against the Rivermen. and knock and whack this guy's heads off, which is weird because he was the one that Daemon had in his back pocket.
Yes.
So it's almost like you're just playing the shell game.
Yeah. It's like moving around the chess pieces. It's just insane.
Well, speaking of the other chess pieces, and I know you've got a very counter perspective response to this one, because if you think back to Game of Thrones, yeah, you've got the major characters that everyone kind of picks their favorite about, but there were a lot of characters in Game of Thrones that were kind of secondary, tertiary characters that people really had fond memories of. One that just pops in my head was Lady Brienne. People have a lot of fond opinions of Lady Brienne, but in the grand scheme of things, she didn't really have a big claim to any kind of hierarchy. The Hound, even people love the Hound. The Hound's just a hired gun. He's just a pile of muscle. He's obviously funny, but like he's another one. He doesn't have any claim to any kind of higher authority or power. So before you just shoot down my question, who were your favorite lighter characters in Dragon?
So I mean, I kind of find it hard to like really like a lot of the characters. I feel like they're all kind of flawed. Like they're all kind of varying degrees of unlikable to me. I mean, like even like Rhaenyra, I don't particularly enjoy. I don't.
So this dislike is not even just a secondary, tertiary thing. This is like the main characters for you as well.
Yeah. I don't know. I find it hard to find characters that are honorable. Like there wasn't even really characters there for like comedic relief. In Game of Thrones, there was like Tormund, or there was the banter between who's Jon Snow's wife in real life. What was her Ingrid? No, what was her name?
Rose is the actor's name.
Was it Ingrid or something with an I?
Egret.
Yeah. So like there was like always, like characters who kind of had like comedic relief. Like even though like they did, or even Jaime Lannister, like you could see he was like, yes, he was hated for a while, but towards the end, people kind of like were like, oh, well, he's kind of turned things around. Like, yeah, redemption arc. I don't know. I don't get any of those kind of like likable feelings towards a lot of characters in this spinoff. I mean, there's a couple people, and like I find it's the people that we don't really know very well. So one of them, I had to look up his name because I didn't even know what the hell his name was. But I called him the Viking looking guy. He ended up being one of the dragon riders. He was the blacksmith, I guess. And so he's actually also like a half sibling to Daemon and Viserys, come to find out. So he's he's a Targaryen bastard basically, and then he's the one that him and his wife are having issues, I guess, like putting food on the table for their daughter. And then like that's why we see him in the beginning of the series and we're like, okay, what does this blacksmith guy who's like on hard times have to do with everything else? You're just kind of like wondering why. And then, they make that call for, okay, Targaryen bastards come forth. Like, and then, so he kind of tells his wife, well, my mom apparently was also the mom of Daemon and Viserys. And so he's like, I'm going to go to see, like, I need to find out whether I can ride a dragon or not. So he goes, he can. And, between the dragon riders, there's that kind of douchey guy from the bar with the silver hair. And that guy kind of gives Jace a hard time. But this guy, Hugh, that was his name. He's actually sitting there like, don't give the prince trouble, like he seems like he's a very honorable guy. The little that we've seen of him, willing to do anything for his family, like isn't holding out his hand like I'm a Targaryen, like he really approaches it with honesty and integrity. He's like, I'm going to see, you know, because of my bloodline, I'm going to see if this is an option for me, like to help, you know? So I liked that guy. I thought he was cool. I,
You know, to maintain your status as the caption queen, you must keep track of these side characters' names.
I know, but it's hard. It's hard. Like, you can't even look up IMDb with a show like this with so many characters. Like, you have to Google it because it's just ridiculous to try to find people. So yeah. So I mean, I did mention before that Daemon, I mean, in the first season, he kind of was comedic relief. Like, he was just kind of, he would say the things that people are thinking but don't want to say out loud. Like, he's just like that. He's got that kind of sense of humor, kind of a dark sense of humor. So he was comedic relief in the first season, I think. This season, I mean, him going around having these hallucinations wasn't the most captivating material for sure, but I just find generally that I want him to be better and I want him to do well. And it seemed like at the end of this season, you know, you're kind of wondering, like, is he gonna be useful, or is he gonna do what he set out to do, or is he just gonna like do something for his own gain? And it turns out that he's just like throwing full support behind Rhaenyra, and he's like, you are my queen, like I will follow you, basically.
The thing with Jace is that I think he feels a sense of lost identity because he's her heir. He's of Targaryen blood, but he's got this jet black hair.
Yeah.
So he has this loss of identity where he's not really in it with this whole conquest to take the throne. But he talks to his cousin, and I can't keep the two of them straight, Rhaena and Baela. Like, one of them leaves, one of them stays. I think Baela is the one that stays. So he's talking to her, and she kind of like gets him to right the ship back around as far as like, this is all yours if you just, you know, kind of play the game a little bit. So, and to your point, I think that's when he kind of gets back in line and it's like, all right, Mom, I'm with you.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I mean, how things kind of ended with the season, like, I felt like Daemon was in a good place. And I do have sympathy for Jace. I mean, the fact that he gets, you know, shit about it, in like the whole kingdom knows, everybody knows that, like, his, like, you know, based on his hair and the way that genes work, they're like, you're not like a full Targaryen. Like, we know your dad is not who your dad we thought it was. Like, you're I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they would consider him a bastard, but like, I sympathize with that, which is not fair. But I don't know. He can be like a little bit too big for his britches sometimes. Like, you're you're not the big man that you think you are, you know, yet you're still a teenage kid, like, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I wrote down Jace's arc as well, just because I find it fascinating that, like, she acknowledges him as her heir, but at the same time, she doesn't seem to be, and I don't know whether it's just her being a protective mother, but she doesn't seem very eager to let him ride a dragon and get into battle. Like, I don't know whether she's being a protective mother or because at times she thinks that she has to be the one to show herself as a leader and ride her dragon into battle. So I almost kind of think like, okay, maybe it's not so much just the protective mother aspect. Maybe it's like, I want to fight. I know I'm in tune with my dragon, but Jace is still young. He really hasn't had that. So I want to make sure that we both don't get axed. And now there's no true heir to the throne.
Yeah. I mean, I took it as like a being protective of him. Like, you're not old enough to do that yet. So just stay out of this one.
Yeah, and going back to the point about the bastard riders, because Jace obviously is very at first very stubborn about. Oh, I guess not at first. I don't think that ever gets really cleaned up a little bit. But he's very stubborn about the bastard riders, and I think the three of them, between Hugh, Ulf, and Adam, that might be this comic relief that we can look forward to, because you basically have a tier between the three of them where Adam is like super fall in line.
Yeah.
I'm with you, my queen. Like he's ready to go. He's ready to fight. Then you have Ulf, who's just kind of like almost in disbelief that he's got, royal blood,
Yeah.
being bastardized. So he's just kind of like having a grand old time. It's like, oh, we're gonna be knights, awesome. I'm a Targaryen, awesome. I got a dragon, sweet, And then Hugh's kind of like in the middle where he's recognizes Rhaenyra's claim, so he's kind of shies towards Adam, but he's also kind of humbled by this, so he's more kind of also shying towards where Ulf's perspective is.
Yeah, I think he's kind of in like uncharted territory. He's like, wow, I was just, kind of grasping at straws to see if I could do this. Like now that I can, like what now? Like I think he's kind of, he doesn't like know what to do now. So
and the other one that I really liked is a very constant Lord Corlys. He's I guess Viserys' brother-in-law, because he's married to Rhaenys.
Yeah.
And he comes off to me as a stable guiding hand and free of ego, which is a very juxtaposition to the Otto Hightowers, the Lord Lairises, even Daemon to an extent, certainly Aemond. So like he's very much diametrically opposed to a lot of these other characters. And he was the one, I feel like at one point, like he was more in Viserys' court as far as naming Rhaenyra as heir, and his loyalty has stayed, although a little bit more on the sidelines, stayed more towards Rhaenyra as the season progresses. And like he's got children that are of Targaryen blood as well, being married to Viserys' sister.
Yeah.
Rhaenys. So, and he, like I said, like he doesn't come off like he has a lot of influence, but he doesn't come off as a puppeteer like Larys. Like I'm like we were saying before, we're not really sure whether Larys still thinks Aegon can be a good king or if he's just kind of pulling the strings, and Larys even to that point seems kind of aware that Aemon's just kind of a tyrant. So that to me, like I think that I find Corlys a bit fascinating in that, and the fact that he is very similar to some of these other characters, but he's so very, very different in perspective and mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I think at one point, didn't he obviously want Rhaenys to, like, didn't he think that there was some right with Rhaenys ruling in some regard? He was kind of wanting her to be a ruler, but I do think his intentions are good. He's not craving power. He's not craving control. Like all he knows is like, going around on his ship. Like that's all he knows. Like he's just a guy going along on the seas. He's pretty, I would say he's pretty humble. He's like a straight man character. He's very very focused on what he thinks and what he wants. He really sticks to that. Very consistent character. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, life of freedom.
Yeah.
And our last topic before we wrap up. So I'm noticing that Rhaenyra's arc is it seems like a preemptive one of Daenerys in Game of Thrones, where you have Rhaenyra, who was legitimately named heir by the king. People question whether or not the ruler should be a queen instead of a king. The council worked their manipulations, and here we are. And then Daenerys, on the other hand, she's the last living heir to her father, who was a king, but her kind of direct right, I don't necessarily know whether it really existed, because her father lost that throne by conquest. So she's almost like she is in denial of that conquest, and she's going to retake the throne because it was her father's to begin with. So I almost kind of feel like they're very parallel story arcs, but they're just different enough where I don't necessarily know whether there's a consistency in the audience or maybe it's unique to each beholder where they may sympathize with Rhaenyra in one way, Daenerys in another way, and not really sympathize with both at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting for those two characters because whereas I liked Daenerys early on and I rooted for her, by the end of Game of Thrones I was not rooting for her. And like I mentioned, I don't know, like Rhaenyra just doesn't tickle my fancy right now. She never really has. I don't know what it is, but the difference is you can see that people were so angry when Game of Thrones ended because of they said it was just a total 180 transformation that Daenerys underwent to just burn this city and to just to go down guns blazing, like not caring about anybody else. And the difference here is that Rhaenyra, when she's basically like, oh cool, so I have to go to King's Landing and take my dragons and basically burn and kill all these innocent people, cool, like great, like that does not feel good to have to do that. Like she's really troubled by the idea of having innocent people be involved when this is a different matter of struggle where these people don't have to die. So yeah, it's a different situation. Like you can tell that she obviously has more compassion and sympathy, even though she does think she's the rightful ruler. It's not that she's being blinded by I have to be in power. I have to be in power. Like Daenerys was, which just ended up wrecking her. Like that was her downfall. It ended up wrecking her. So I mean, I think you're right. I look at it as Rhaenyra had more of a legitimate claim than I would say that Daenerys did. Like it was almost like she was just kind of denying the fact that there was that conquering, and she just felt entitled to it. It was like, oh well, I should be in power, so that's what I'm going for.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a more of a egotistical one versus an altruistic. Yeah.
For sure.
So, with that being said, we touched on it right off the top of the show. This is originally said 200 years before Game of Thrones. So we've got somewhere between 130, 150 years left to make up. So to wrap up, do you think that we're going to get a resolution between these current warring parties, or will all these characters we see now be irrelevant in another 2 seasons or so when we get closer to the family members, the house members that we're used to, that we know had a direct tie to Game of Thrones? Like what's kind of the audience's what should the audience's scope be as far as getting some kind of resolution to tie this spin-off with the original series that everyone knew and loved?
I mean, I think it's going to take a while. I mean, they did a significant time jump in the first season, so we could get that in the third season. They could have, current time of what's going to happen when Rhaenyra goes to King's Landing with the new dragon riders. They could have that play out, and then there might be a time jump about how that ends up ending. So there could be a significant time jump, but yeah, I mean, I think we're probably looking at another few seasons before we get to that point of the characters we know, or where we would see how Better Call Saul did with Breaking Bad characters cameos. I think it's going to be quite a few seasons before we get to the characters we know, or seeing people we know, rather than just the houses or the families that we've heard of.
You wrote an interesting note. You were kind of trying to get the pulse of the people with this.
Yeah.
And people were describing it as slow and boring.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, I felt engaged with this one, and maybe just because I was paying extra attention for the purposes of our show. But I felt extra engaged with this one, whereas the first one, I felt engaged in the early part of it when you had Viserys in power, Rhaenyra was a little girl, and then I kind of drifted away of it as they kind of jumped forward, 10 years or whatever the case may be. So I almost felt like the first season was the slower one to me. And maybe society kind of thinks the other way because it was new and fresh, as opposed to, listen, this is a story arc you're starting from scratch. You got to build up to something.
Yeah. It kind of seemed like people were, they said it was slow. They said it was boring, as far as this season goes. And then I think I did see a few comments where once it got to like the 6th or 7th episode, people were like, oh, now it's getting better. Like now there's 2 episodes left and I'm really excited to see what happens. But yeah, and then some people, you had them understanding that like, okay, well, this is used for background info. Like we have to get from point A to point B. So like to get to season 3, to get to the good captivating stuff, like we got to go through some setup here. So and then there was a lot of people that are like, okay, we get the point. Why does Daemon have to keep wandering around having hallucinations? And like, I kind of agreed with that. I was like, I can't tell what's real, what's not. Like, it's like, okay, we know that this witch is poisoning him or whatever. It's just like, get past it. Let's just see the thing that we needed to see. And like, honestly, I wish we had seen that like flash forward vision that he had like 2-3 episodes ago.
Especially because to me, the captivating parts about Daemon are the here and now Daemon, not what is living in the back of his depths of his mind. Like it's Daemon's experience with what side he's on, like who Daemon is in the flesh, to me is the captivating part about him, not these kind of visions and stuff.
Right. Well, to me, it's like, I think he has the potential to be like a really powerful and like influential and like, I don't want to say a good guy, but he has so much potential to do something important. And he's just kind of been sleeping on it his whole life. So I just kind of felt like they kind of kept the hallucinations going on a little bit too long. Like, let's cut to the chase and let's see him make a difference and let's see him make some progress as a character.
Well, we're making progress, and don't sleep on us, because whenever season 3 drops, whenever season 4 drops, we'll be right back at it to see how this story arc continues through the Targaryen household and how we wind up getting to Game of Thrones. If you enjoy listening to us, we would very much appreciate you leave a 5-star rating if you're listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Help work that algorithm. Some dirtbag out on the internet gave us a 1-star a while back, so we're trying to fight the good fight to get back into respectable rankings. Other than Apple and Spotify, if you want to listen along, it's Google Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. And if you just want to see us speaking and see our flaming red hair, that's YouTube and Rumble. You can tune in there as well and kind of watch along with us as we go along. Speaking of following us along, Instagram and TikTok. She's Binge the Ginge. That's dots between the words on Instagram and all one word on TikTok. And I am Nutmeg 2 Palmetto. That is the number 2. And someone over here doesn't like the palmetto bug, I heard a few times. Episode 22, we are heading into doing some hard time as the shots that don't stop firing in yet another show about testing loyalties and who is the top dog, as we dissect the interweaving relationship behind season 3 of Jeremy Renner's cop and crime drama, Mayor of Kingstown. Oh yeah, I think that Taylor Sheridan guy is involved in this one too.
Just not a woke one.
Woke one?
It's just not a woke Taylor Sheridan show. The unwoke Taylor Sheridan show.
We've already done that. Hopefully no more. Until that very next real review, Red and Red, signing out.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What?
Do what?
I'd like to be pimps from Oakland or cowboys from Arizona, but it's not Halloween.
Let the dogs out, like, who let the dogs out? Who brought this guy along?
Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
grow up, Peter Pan. Count Chocula.
X never, ever marks the spot.
One more thing. Do me a favor. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
You did it. You crazy son of a bitch, you did it.
Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
No. Try not. Do. Or do not. There is no try.
All right. Then you do us proud. Because I don't want no scrubs.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness. You weren't on any mercy mission.
Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'll take care, all right? None but love for you. None but love for you.
10. X marks the spot.
Have any clue what's about to happen to him?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night.
Blow up! Peace!
Smile, you son of a...
Hey, ain't too proud to beg.
Come on.
What?
It's not funny anymore.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not trying to be. Still, nothing. I swear to you.
But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night, we will not vanish without a fight, we're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.